The storm came in low and hard off the sea, driving needles of cold rain sideways across the courtyard as Catelyn Stark passed beneath the yawning gate of Storm's End. The castle rose around her like a ring of night itself, dark stone wet and slick, its towers carved into silhouettes by the erratic flash of lightning out over Shipbreaker Bay. Wind pulled at her gray furs and at the Tully trout on her breast, but the guards flanking her seemed untroubled by the weather. They wore the green cloak and golden rose of House Tyrell over their mail, and some had affixed a crowned stag to their helms, as if they meant to prove they had already chosen a king. The horse stamped once, uneasy with the thunder rolling overhead. Catelyn stroked its neck with a gloved hand, murmuring the sort of nonsense that had soothed her boys when they were fretful babes. It did nothing to quiet the clamor in her own heart. Robb, she thought, her firstborn's name a steady ache. The young wolf, who had been a boy studying maps by firelight not so very long ago, now marching at the head of northern spears. I am too far from you, too far, and everything I do here may yet fail you. A squire in Tyrell livery hurried forward as she dismounted, taking the reins with a quick bow. "My Lady Stark," he shouted over the roar of the wind, water beating on his dark curls. "Lord Renly bid you welcome to Storm's End and begs your forgiveness that he cannot greet you in the yard." The king holds counsel. That word again. King. The realm seemed suddenly thick with kings, like mushrooms after a long rain, each one warring to root out the others. "Lead on, then," Catelyn said, tightening her cloak about her throat. "These old bones have had enough of your southern storms." The boy smiled as if she had made a jest. They crossed the courtyard at a near trot, boots splashing through puddles, rain like cold fingers on her face. Men moved everywhere. Tyrell men in gilded half-plate, Stormlanders cloaked in yellow and black, archers with longbows unstrung to protect the cords from the wet. Grooms rushed to and fro with steaming horses. From the walls came the bark of orders, the clank of chain. Storm's End had the feel of an inn packed to its rafters before a fight erupts. Too many bodies, too many voices, an air that crackled with the sense that something had to happen soon. That sense tightened when she caught sight of the banners above the inner gatehouse. The golden roses of Highgarden, yes, and the crowned stag of Baratheon on a green field for Renly. But another stag as well on black, the ancient arms of Storm's End. There was no other reason to fly them than to remind all within sight that another Baratheon claimed the same blood and the same right. So he is near, she thought. Stannis. The letter Robb had sent her at Riverrun had been brief and ink-stained, but the boy's script had been firm. Renly wears a crown and marches with the Reach. Stannis wears another and sits at Dragonstone. The whole of the South burns. I need you to make them see sense, mother. Sense, Catelyn thought now, as the squire led her up a flight of slick stone steps and into the comparative dimness of a covered passage. The word felt frail in her mouth, a bit of wool set between two grinding millstones. Sense had fled with Robert Baratheon's last breath. The realm was in the hands of men who mistook wanting for deserving. She swallowed down her weariness as they passed servants with baskets of rushes, stewards with ledgers tucked beneath their arms, the smell of baking bread and smoke and wet wool all mixing into a single dense perfume. Somewhere a woman laughed too loudly, the sound abruptly cut off. Somewhere else, a man coughed between words about levies and supply. They reached a set of double doors of thick oak banded with iron. The squire rapped once smartly and pushed them open at the shout from within. Warmth hit Catelyn first, the heavy heat of braziers and bodies in a confined space. Then the sound, a swirl of voices that broke upon the threshold. "My Lady Stark," the boy said again, standing aside with a flourish. "The king in the south awaits you." She stepped through into a sea of silk and steel and scent. Renly Baratheon looked every inch the storybook King Catelyn's daughters had once whispered about. He stood at the far end of the hall before the high table, flanked by men in helms crested with the colors of the rainbow, his green enamel armor catching every stray ember of light. A golden rose clasp held his cloak at the throat, and the stubble along his jaw could not make him look older. If anything, it lent him a kind of roguish youth. At his side stood Margaery Tyrell, the girl who would be queen. She was small beside him, her hair a rich brown tumble around a face made for courtly tapestries. The blue of her gown was so dark it was nearly black in the candlelight, embroidered with tiny silver thorns that winked as she moved. Her hand rested lightly on Renly's forearm, as if she had been born to stand with a king. Conversation rippled and parted as Catelyn walked the length of the hall. Men turned to watch her pass. Stern storm lords with salt-weathered faces, reach knights with soft, scented hands and eyes like polished glass, lords of lesser houses whose names she did not know but whose expressions she recognized all the same. Calculation, curiosity, wariness. Renly stepped down from the dais before she could bow, his smile bright enough to be felt rather than seen. "Lady Catelyn," he called, voice carrying easily over the murmurs. "You bring the North's chill with you, I see. Even Storm's End shivers." "Storm's End has stood against worse storms than a Tully's bones, your grace," she replied, giving him the slightest of curtsies. Her knees protested. So many miles, so many cold nights in the saddle. "I thank you for your welcome." Margaery dipped her chin with practiced grace. "We are honored by your presence, my lady." The tales of the young wolf's victories run faster than the raven's. There was admiration in her tone, but something else as well. A curiosity that might turn to envy or to alliance, depending on which way the wind blew. Catelyn met the girl's gaze and found a steadiness there she had not expected. Margaery Tyrell might be young, but she did not strike Catelyn as foolish. "I come not to trade in tales," Catelyn said, "only in truth, and truth is a rarer coin than ever of late." Renly's smile thinned, though it did not vanish. "Then let us find some, between us." He gestured to the high table. "You must be weary, my lady. We have hot wine and food from Highgarden's fields, not the thin fare of the camps. Sit, and we will speak of your son." "Of my son, but not of your nephew's head on a spike," Catelyn thought. "Not of the father whose name you shout when you call yourself king." Still, she allowed herself to be led up onto the dais and seated at Renly's right hand, with Margaery beyond and the Rainbow Knights arrayed along the table. A servant refilled her cup with spiced wine, the steam curling up into her face. She lifted it, inhaling the scent. For a moment, in that warmth and that light, it was easy to imagine herself back at Winterfell's high table, listening to Robb argue with Bran over some small point of tactic, watching Sansa's eyes follow Joffrey's every motion. She set the cup down carefully. "You style yourself king," she said, not bothering to soften the words. They were too far into the game for pretty dances. "Yet there is another Baratheon who does the same." Renly's jaw flexed. "Stannis is my brother." "He is your elder," Catelyn replied. "Robert's heir by all the laws of gods and men. If law still means anything in this realm." A murmur went through the hall like wind through leaves. One of the Rainbow Knights shifted in his seat. She thought it might be Ser Rabar, though she could not be sure beneath his colored mantle. Across the room, she saw Loras Tyrell lean in to speak to another knight at his side. His expression clouded. "Law." Renly rolled the word on his tongue as if considering how it tasted. "And where was this reverence for law when my brother's so-called heirs sat the throne with golden hair and Lannister faces? Where was it when your lord husband was made hand and sent to dig through the muck, only to have his head struck off for his pains? It was a fair blow, and it landed." Catelyn's throat tightened. Ned's face came to her mind's eye unbidden, his gray eyes steady even as the world moved to crush him. He had died for the truth of bastards and broken vows. And here she was, asking another man to weigh his crown against a dead man's honor. "Robert is dead," she said softly. "The boy on the throne is no true son. That much we know. But there are two brothers left. Every raven that flies with a different king's name in its beak brings more death, more ruin. You are not Robb's enemy, your grace, nor is Stannis. But if the three of you pull this realm in three directions, there will be nothing left to salvage." Renly held her gaze for a long moment. Lightning flashed beyond the narrow window slits, outlining his face in stark white for an instant, making him look older than his years. Then he looked away, down the hall toward where the Tyrell lords sat together like a bank of green and gold fog. "You ask for peace," he said. "I have offered it to your son. If Robb bends the knee." "You offered him a southern lord's place, after you saw he could not be crushed quickly." The anger surprised her with its sharpness. "You speak of bending and breaking as if they are the only choices. Robb will not kneel to you while you sit atop a stolen claim. He is no oath-breaker. And I am." Renly's smile was gone now, his eyes dark as the sea beyond the walls. "I fought for Robert against the Dragon Prince. I bled for that throne you Northerners now pretend to scorn. It is because of me and mine that there was a realm at all for Eddard Stark to serve. The realm is not a toy to be fought over because you bled for it once," Catelyn replied, thinking of Theon Greyjoy's eager face, of the boy's insistence that his father's rebellion had given him some special right. "Your brother Stannis would say the same, I think. He too fought. He too held a castle against all odds when Robert needed it." At the name Stannis, something flickered in Renly's eyes. Not hatred, not quite. Resentment, yes, and old wounds. But beneath that, she thought she saw another thing entirely, quick and shy as a fish flashing just below the surface. "Hurt. We will speak of my brother," Renly said, his voice brittle. "Sooner than you may think. His ships were sighted off the coast this morning, creeping along the edges of my sea like crabs. He thinks to steal Storm's End from me with black sails and black moods. But this castle knows me as Lord now." Catelyn felt the hall fall away for a heartbeat. "He comes here? To Storm's End? Where else?" Renly drained his cup in one swallow and set it down with a muted thud. "Let him come. I have no need of his leave to wear my crown. But you may have need of his swords," she thought, "and he of yours." Outside, the thunder growled again like some old god stirring in his sleep, and Catelyn Stark shivered, though the hall was warm. The sea mist was still clinging to the black sails when Stannis Baratheon came ashore. By the time his column reached Storm's End, the day had sunk into a bruised twilight, and rain came down in earnest, pattering on steel and leather, hissing on hot horseflesh. The men who marched beside him were fewer than Renly's hosts but hardened, their cloaks threadbare, their banners old as the war that had first raised them. From the high window slit of a watchtower, Catelyn watched them file into the outer yard, the crowned stag on black field rising to snap and twist in the wind, the lift and drop of pikes and spears, the set of thin, hungry faces. These were not the shining lads of Highgarden, perfumed and perfumed again. These were men who had eaten rats on Dragonstone and called it feast. Men who had followed a grim, unforgiving lord because he was the rock to which they had moored their hopes. Stannis himself was easy to pick out. Where Renly favored brilliant enamel and banners that glittered, Stannis wore plain dark plate marked by use, his sword belt plain, his cloak a somber gray. He moved with a stiffness that had nothing to do with age. It was the stiffness of a man braced always for the next blow, never entirely convinced it would not land. To his right walked a man in a patched cloak, his beard salted with white. Davos Seaworth, she knew, the smuggler made night. The stories painted him half rogue, half saint. But what she saw from her vantage was a tired man who kept pace with his lord despite the limp in his step. On Stannis' left came the woman in red. Catelyn had heard of her even before this journey south. Rumors rode ahead of Melisandre of Asshai like crows on the wind. Some said she was a witch, others that she was some eastern priestess come to steal Stannis' soul. None of the tales had prepared Catelyn for the sight of her walking bareheaded through the deluge, scarlet silk clinging to her form, the rain seeming to shy away from her as if reluctant to mar the cloth. Her hair was the color of fresh spilled blood, and the ruby at her throat pulsed with its own internal fire. Renly came down to meet them with all his show. He had not donned a helm, though his guards did. He wanted his brother to see his face, Catelyn realized, wanted him to know exactly who stood waiting on the steps of the castle Stannis had once held for their elder brother. "Storm's End stands taller than ever. I see," Catelyn heard Renly call as Stannis crossed the yard. "I half expected your ships to have battered the walls down by now, brother, the way men speak of your stubbornness." Stannis stopped 3 paces from the steps. His gaze climbed, taking in the sight of Renly's white horse behind him, the Rainbow Guard, the Tyrell men watching with their hands near their hilts. He did not look impressed. "You flew my stag from these walls once," he said, his voice flat as winter. "You fly yours now, and your rose-bearers with it. Have you turned Storm's End into a garden, Renly, or just another of your tourney grounds?" The rain drummed on helm and leather as thunder muttered overhead. Men watched from the walls, from the galleries, from the shadows of doorways. Catelyn, standing with a cluster of Stormlords on an interior balcony, felt their collective attention sharpen. Here it is, she thought. Here is the fracture line, clear as any crack in ice. If it widens, the whole river goes. Renly laughed, but it rang a little false. "You always did begrudge me a pretty cloak. I thought myself kind, flying your colors as well as mine. The Smallfolk know one stag from another only with help, and you were never one for smiling and waving." "Smiles do not hold castles," Stannis replied, "nor do cloaks. Men do. Others do. You took oaths to our brother. Now I find you crowned and calling yourself king on the strength of the same blood that flows in my veins. When did your vows turn to dust in your mouth, little brother?" "Little," Renly said softly. "Still that." Melisandre's eyes moved between them with the slow fascination of a cat watching 2 dogs circle. Davos shifted his weight, his gaze flicking up toward the balcony where Catelyn stood. For half a heartbeat their eyes met. He gave her a brief, almost apologetic nod, as if to say, "You see it as I do." 2 men, 1 crown, and too much history between them. Catelyn forced herself forward, to the front of the balcony, where her voice might carry. "Lords," she called, letting the stone take her words and push them outward. "If you must tear at old wounds, do it in the hall with wine, not in the rain with swords at your sides. I did not ride from the Trident to watch 2 brothers brawl in a yard like squires." Stannis's head snapped up at the sound of her voice. For a moment, surprise cracked his stern features. "Lady Stark," he said, "I had heard you were at Riverrun still, mourning your husband." "I mourn him every day," she answered. "Wherever I stand. Where I stand now is between 2 kings who were once brothers. Might we go inside before the storm steals the rest of your tempers?" Renly shot her a look that was half gratitude, half irritation at being scolded in front of his men. Stannis only grunted, but he moved first, trudging up the last few steps as if wading through something thicker than rain. The 2 brothers passed within a sword's length of one another as they entered the keep. Neither reached for steel. Catelyn let herself breathe again. The war room of Storm's End was a long stone chamber with a low arched ceiling, its ribs blackened by years of smoke. The great map table in its center bore scars like an old soldier. Knife gouges marred the painted rivers and mountains. Here and there a burn mark where some careless elbow had toppled a candle. The chairs around it had been dragged wide today to make room for more bodies. Lords of the Stormlands and the Reach lined the walls, their faces a painted gallery of expectation, suspicion, and exhaustion. At the head of the table, under the carved likeness of a rearing stag, stood Stannis and Renly. They might almost have been strangers. Stannis, gaunt and stiff, his hair thinning, his beard speckled with gray. His eyes were pale and hard, the color of sea ice under a cold sky. Renly, full-cheeked and dark-haired, his beard trimmed close, his armor gleaming with recent polish. His storm-green cloak fell in an artful sweep over one shoulder. Yet in the set of their mouths, in the angle at which they held their shoulders, Catelyn saw Robert, dead and alive again in 2 lesser reflections. "The law is plain," Stannis was saying as she took her place at one side of the table. "Our brother's trueborn heirs are bastards. The throne should have passed to me the day he died. Not to a woman's son. Not to the 3rd in line because he came sooner to reach for it." Renly rested his fingers lightly on the map, swirling them in a slow circle around King's Landing. "The law," he said. "You speak of law as if it sits on your shoulder like a tame hawk, Stannis. But the realm is not ink on a page. It is people, and people follow strength. They follow hope. They follow a king they can love. Love, Stannis repeated, the word dripping disdain. Love did not feed them when the dragons came against us at Dragonstone. Love did not hold Storm's End when Mace Tyrell tried to starve me out. Men eat because walls stand, Renly. They live because some of us are willing to do what must be done while others sit playing at tourneys. A flush darkened Renly's cheeks. Around them, the lords shifted. Ser Loras Tyrell's mouth tightened, but he said nothing. Margaery, standing a little back from the table, watched with eyes that missed nothing. Catelyn felt the moment stretching, ready to snap. "Your Grace," she said into the taut air. "Both of you. You are not wrong, either of you. Law matters. So does love. So does the realm. But tell me this. How many swords does love raise for you, Renly? How many does law raise for you, Stannis? And against how many does each set itself, if you turn your banners upon each other?" Renly's gaze flicked to her, irritation giving way to curiosity. Stannis glowered, but he did not cut her off. "You talk as if Robb were your enemy, and the Lannisters too, and each other besides." Catelyn went on, voice steady as she could make it. "But the north is bled already. The riverlands burn. The Ironborn raid along the coasts. The men who come to my son's banners speak of wolves fighting lions, while in their own villages they must fight hunger and fear. You are Baratheons, brothers. You fought once together for this realm. Now you would tear it in three. My son is king in the north," she said, "and I will not gainsay the men who named him so. But even if he could hold that title to the end of his life, what good is a kingdom north of the neck if the rest of Westeros turns to cinders? If the Lannisters rule unchecked in the south, with their bastard on the throne, they will never leave the north in peace. Robb knows this. That is why I am here, to see if there is sense left among those who yet call themselves Baratheon." "Sense?" Renly echoed, rubbing at the stubble on his jaw. "You think sense can be found in this room? If it cannot, the realm is doomed," Catelyn answered simply. A soft laugh rippled from the far end of the chamber. All eyes turned to the woman in red. "Doomed," Melisandre said, letting the word flow like warm wine. "The realm is doomed whether you come to terms or no, if you put your faith only in steel and ink. In my country, we burn such parchments to light the way for the true battle." Stannis' scowl deepened. "This talk of yours belongs in the Septs of Ashai or wherever you came from, woman, not in my council." "In your council," she echoed, head tilted. The ruby at her throat throbbed faintly. "Is this your council, my king? Or your brother's? I see 2 stags before me and a pack of hounds at their heel, snapping over the same bone." A murmur of displeasure went up. Renly's hand dropped to the pommel of his sword, the move almost unconscious. "You are bold for a foreign priestess to speak so in my hall," he said. "In your hall," Melisandre repeated, as if testing the words. "In your brother's castle, on a rock that stood when dragons ruled this land and will stand when all your castles have fallen to ash. The flames show me a darkness in the north that does not care which crown sits in King's Landing. Cold shadows and eyes of blue." Catelyn felt the tiny hairs on the back of her neck rise, unbidden. Ned's tales of the long night came drifting back from the years when they had lain together in Winterfell's bed, his voice low enough not to wake the children. Old Nan's stories, too, of white shadows beyond the wall. Nonsense, she told herself now. Children's tales. Yet the memory of the cold in the God's Wood at Winterfell was sharp in her bones. Stannis made a dismissive gesture. "Not now," he said. "The North is the North. When this war is won, we will send men to look to it." "Will you?" Melisandre murmured. "If there is a world left to send them from?" "Enough," Davos said quietly from the shadows. His voice was raspy but firm. "Your Grace, this talk does us no good. The Lady Stark wants sense. She will not find it in the bottom of a fire pit. If we are to do anything here, we must decide whether we mean to put our swords to Lannister throats or each other's." Stannis's gaze went to his smuggler knight as if seeing him anew. Renly watched the exchange, amusement tugging faintly at his mouth. "My brother, Davos Seaworth," Stannis said at last, "has the heart to speak what others fear to. I will hear him." "And I," Renly said, folding his arms, "it would be a shame if we killed one another before I had the chance." Later, after the worst of the barbs had been spent and the lords had been sent away, the room felt emptier, though it held the same walls, the same table, the same storm muttering beyond the stones. Only a handful remained. The brothers, Catelyn, Margaery, Loras, Davos, Melisandre. The candle flames burned lower now, their wax trailing in thick, half-cooled rivulets over the wooden holders. Renly stood with both hands splayed on the map, head bowed as if in prayer. Margaery hovered near his shoulder, her face composed but her eyes tight at the corners. Loras paced along the room's edge like a caged cat, one hand never straying far from the hilt of his sword. Stannis had not moved for some time. He stood straight-backed near the table's far end, staring at the carved representation of the Iron Throne as if he meant to will it into his possession by gaze alone. "You both see the same thing when you look at that chair," Catelyn said at last, breaking the silence. "A right denied, a duty unfulfilled. Your brother Robert's seat. You could stand there until the candles burned down to ash and neither of you would move closer to it." Renly raised his head. "And what would you have us do, my lady? Toss a coin? Share the thing? Half a year each, like some poor wife threesomely wed?" "You jest," she said. "Because if you speak plainly, you will have to name what you truly fear, that men will see one of you as the more rightful and the other as the more beloved, that you will always be a shadow to each other." Stannis's mouth tightened. "I am done being a shadow," he said. "I held Dragonstone while our brother caroused. I held Storm's End when our enemies tried to starve me. I burned in the sight of my king and was never seen. This realm owes me its breath. It will give me my due, or I will drag it screaming into obedience." Margaery's eyes flashed. "And what of those who have never heard your name spoken with anything but grudging respect in a council chamber? The Smallfolk do not know Stannis Baratheon, my lord. They know tales of Renly hunting with Robert, laughing with him, feasting with him. They line the roads to see him pass. Hope is a coin as real as fear. Hope does not put bread in their mouths," Stannis snapped. "My coin is justice. And justice without hope becomes terror." Margaery replied so softly that Catelyn almost missed the words. "The Lannisters have taught us that well enough." The exchange surprised Catelyn. She had thought the Tyrell girl merely decorative, but there was iron beneath the silk and something sharper than perfume in her veins. "I have no wish to be loved by fishwives," Stannis said. "I will be obeyed." "Robert never wished so little," Renly murmured. "Robert wished for an endless summer and a full cup," Stannis shot back. "And look where his wishing left us." Silence fell again, thick as wool. Catelyn stepped closer to the table, placing her hand on the map where the neck narrowed the land to a bottleneck. "My father used to say that a man may own land in his mind without ever setting foot on it," she said. "A child with a stick can rule a kingdom in his play while the mud between his toes remains just mud. You could go on like this until one of you lies dead and the other stands alone atop a pile of corpses, wondering why the smell of rot clings to his crown." Renly gave a humorless bark of laughter. "You paint a pretty picture. I have seen enough war to know that there are no pretty pictures left," Catelyn said. "Only choices. You can fight each other and leave the Lannisters the space to carve up the realm. Or you can do what your brother Robert did once. Stand together against a common enemy." Stannis's eyes narrowed. "You speak as if this were some tourney melee. We stand back to back, swing our swords, and the lion obligingly falls." "I speak as a woman who has seen her husband's head spiked on the walls of a foreign city," Catelyn replied, anger flaring bright and cold. "As a mother who hears each raven wake her from sleep, certain it brings word of another son lost. You men talk of crowns as if they are toys. They are not. They are weights that crack the necks of those who wear them. So share the burden, if you cannot lay it down. Share, Stannis repeated. He looked at her as if she had suggested he pluck down the moon and wear it for a hat. There is one throne, one king. There can be one king, she said, and one hand upon his shoulder. There can be a line of succession agreed in ink and witnessed by lords. There can be terms. Is that not so, Ser Davos? All eyes shifted to the smuggler knight. Davos looked as uncomfortable under the sudden weight of attention as any man unaccustomed to being addressed in such company. He cleared his throat. "My lady is not wrong," he said slowly. "If you fight each other, you thin yourselves. I've seen enough sea battles to know what happens when two captains fight over the same helm in the middle of a storm." "We are not at sea," Stannis said, exasperated. "The realm is," Davos replied quietly. "And I'd rather see you both with your hands on the tiller than one in the water and the other dragged down by the same wave." Renly straightened, some of the mockery leaving his face. He looked at Davos, then at Catelyn, then finally at his brother. "You would never bend the knee to me," he said to Stannis. "We both know that. You would choke on the words." "I will not," Stannis said, "bend the knee to a usurper while I live. Then we must find another path," Catelyn urged. "Stannis Baratheon, you are the lawful heir by all the chains of birth and law. Renly Baratheon, you are loved and followed in the south as few men have ever been. If one of you alone wears the crown, the other will always be a rallying point for those who feel denied. Unless you bind yourselves together so tightly that no sword can slip between you." Renly's hand drifted over the map, coming to rest on Highgarden, then sliding along the painted road to King's Landing. "What are you suggesting?" he asked slowly. "Terms," Catelyn said. "Renly gives up his claim to the throne and recognizes Stannis as king. In return, Stannis names Renly as his hand, an heir after his daughter should she fail to issue children. The Tyrells keep their promised queen, only with a different king before her. The south stays whole. The north," she swallowed, "the north might yet find peace with men who know the value of their word." "A generous offer," Melisandre purred. "For a man who seeks his crown in flames and blood, you would give away so much of its light, my king." Stannis ignored her. His face had gone still in that way of his, all feeling driven deep beneath the surface where no one could see. The vein at his temple beat once, twice. "So I am king," he said. "In your scheme. In the only scheme the law will bear," Catelyn replied. "Let Renly be the smiling face they see while you are the iron hand behind it. Let Margaery Tyrell sit at your side as queen and bring you the South's love, while you bring it justice. Between you, you may yet break the Lannister hold." "And what of your son?" Renly asked. "Will Robb Stark bend the knee to Stannis then? Or to me?" "To the realm," Catelyn said, "if you can make one worth bending for." The room seemed to draw in around Renly as he stared at the painted land before him. For the first time since Catelyn had come to Storm's End, he looked his age. The easy jauntiness fell away like a cloak shrugged from the shoulders. Beneath it, she saw not the storybook king but a younger brother who had spent his life laughing loudly enough to be heard over the silence where his elder's praise should have been. "What would he say, do you think?" Renly murmured. "Robert, if he could see us now." Stannis snorted. "He would say, 'Fill my cup and let the girls dance faster.'" "Not in this room," Renly said almost sharply. "Not here. Not like this." Catelyn thought of Robert Baratheon as she had known him in Winterfell, thickened by drink and years, yet still carrying something of the storm that had toppled a dynasty. She imagined him here, in this war room where once he had paced as a young lord, hearing his brothers throw their claims like knives upon the table. "He would have called us both fools," she said. "He would have cursed you for not winning his wars for him faster. Then he would have gone hunting, trusting you to make sense of what he left behind." Renly's mouth twitched. "Apartment to apartment." He lifted his hand from the map and let it drift to the little carved crown that marked King's Landing. Slowly, he pushed it along the painted King's Road, away from the city, across the Trident, all the way to Dragonstone, and set it down there. The sound it made upon the wood was small. It might yet echo for years. Margaery's hand tightened on his arm. "Renly," she breathed. He covered her fingers with his own. "I will not see the realm destroyed because I liked the taste of a word," he said, voice low but carrying. "King sits sweet on the tongue, but it burns going down. I have no wish to choke on it." "This is folly," Loras burst out. "You have the Reach behind you, Renly, the Stormlands, half the realm. Why should you bend your neck to a brother who never once bent his in gratitude when you saved his hide?" "Because there is more at stake than my pride," Renly said softly, not looking at him. "And more than my glory. I will not be another sword in a war of all against all. I will not be another Robert, fighting for a crown without knowing what to do with it." He turned to Stannis, and in that movement something shifted between them, some old axis. "You are the elder," Renly said. "The law is clear. It was never that I did not know it, Stannis. Only that I did not trust the law to give the realm what it needs. You have always been hard. The realm has had hardness from the Lannisters. It needs more than that. It needs justice," Stannis said. "And mercy with it," Renly countered. "If I set aside my crown, if I kneel before you and name you king, then you must swear to me now that you will not turn the realm into a gallows yard. That you will temper your justice with the counsel of those who know how to make men love you, or at least not hate you enough to rise again." Stannis regarded him with a flat stare. "You suggest yourself as the balm to my iron hand." Renly's smile was brief and wry. "Call it what you like. I call it sense." Catelyn's heart hammered. She had not dared, even in her most desperate calculations, to imagine Renly would move so far, so quickly. Men in love with crowns seldom gave them up for anything less than the weight of a blade at their throat. "The North will remember this," she said quietly. "Whatever comes, Robb will remember, if he lives to see the end." "Your son's memory is his own," Renly replied. "I do this for me, and Seven help us, for you as well, brother." He stepped back from the map, then sank to one knee on the rush-covered floor. The act seemed to suck all the air from the room. Loras made a strangled sound. Margaery's grip on Renly's shoulder trembled once, then steadied. Davos's eyes widened. Even Melisandre's composure seemed to waver, the faintest hint of something like surprise flickering across her face before the mask of serenity settled back into place. "Stannis Baratheon," Renly said, looking up at his brother. "By right of birth and blood, you are Robert's heir. If I have offended that right, I beg the realm's pardon and yours. I, Renly of House Baratheon, Lord of Storm's End, do here lay aside all claim to the Iron Throne and name you my king. If you will have me, I will be your hand, your sword in the south, and, if the gods are kind, your heir after your daughter and her issue." Stannis did not move. The muscles in his jaw worked as if he chewed on stones. "You kneel as if you expect me to clap and bid you rise," he said at last. "Is this another of your jests, Renly? Another of your mummer's tricks?" Renly's expression hardened. "Do you see me laughing?" "No," Stannis admitted. "And I have never known you to kneel for anything but a punchline." "Perhaps you never looked," Renly said. "You were always watching Robert." A silence settled, heavy as a cloak soaked in rain. Then Stannis stepped forward. He stood over his kneeling brother, the difference in their postures a stark emblem of what might be or might have been. "You should have done this from the first," he said, "instead of playing at crowns." "I know," Renly replied. "I am trying to do it now." Stannis's hands flexed at his sides. Catelyn saw them twitch, as if he fought some instinct. Whether to strike or to lift, she could not say. "Rise, then," he said curtly. "I will not have my brother on his knees like a supplicant in a September rise, and we will see if we can make something of this mess together." Relief flooded Catelyn so swiftly that her knees went weak for a moment. She gripped the edge of the table to steady herself as Renly stood, his shoulders settling into a new shape. "A king, then," Renly said, "and a hand." "Do not think the latter is the greater honor," Stannis muttered. "If I had my choice, I would be hand to a better king." "Alas," Renly replied dryly, "we must both work with what we have." It took another day to prepare the spectacle, because men with titles could not let a single stone be moved without 3 others watching to make certain no advantage hid beneath it. Ravaged as it was by the ongoing war, the realm still knew how to celebrate the shape of power. Storm's End's Great Hall was dressed in its finest for the swearing. Tapestries that had seen 3 Baratheon generations hung from the walls, their colors dimmed but still true. Stags rearing against a field of storm clouds, the first Durrandon kings raising their hands against the sea. The great antlered helm of the Storm Kings sat above the high seat, flanked now by 2 banners, the crowned stag on gold, the crowned stag on black. Renly had insisted the third be raised as well, a golden rose on a field of green, to remind all present whose grain would feed the armies that marched from here. Catelyn stood to one side, near a pillar carved with leaping hearts, her place neither high nor low. Suited her. She had no desire for eyes upon her. Her work had been done when she put the flint in the tinder. Now she watched the spark take, praying it would not yet turn to wildfire. The lords came one by one to swear their oaths. Lord Caron of Night Song knelt first, his dark hair falling into his eyes as he pledged his knights and his life. Von Swan followed, then smaller storm lords whose names blurred together for Catelyn as the day wore on. Tyrell bannermen came after, Lord Rowan of Golden Grove, Lord Tarley of Horn Hill, Lord Mullendor of Uplands. Each knelt, hands clasped before them, and spoke the words that would bind them for now. "I swear to be true to King Stannis of House Baratheon," they said in one variation or another, "to bear him sword and shield in peace and in war, to counsel him honestly and obey his lawful commands, so long as his rule is just and my life is his to claim." Stannis sat through it all with the same stony expression, his shoulders squared, his crown, a simple circlet of dark gold shaped like antlers, resting heavy upon his brow. He acknowledged each oath with the barest inclination of his head. Only once did his gaze flicker, when a little knot of lesser lords from the marches knelt together and stammered through their vows as if afraid they might misstep and be struck dead on the spot. For an instant, a flicker of something like pity crossed his features. Then it was gone. Renly stood at his right, cloaked still in green but wearing no crown. He had chosen a stag brooch instead, its antlers enameled black and gold. Margaery stood near his shoulder, her maiden's cloak heavy with fresh-stitched roses. If she felt the weight of the hall's eyes, she did not show it. Her smile was serene, her chin high. When the last lord had sworn, Stannis rose. "You have come to me pledged already," he said, his voice carrying to the rafters. "To my brother Robert. Some of you rode with us when we broke the dragon. Some of you feasted with us in the years when he turned from war to wine. Some of you came to his banners only when it was clear the Targaryens could not reclaim what they had lost. Your reasons matter less than your oaths. You swore, and while he lived, you kept those vows. That much I will grant you." He paused, letting the murmur that rose die down. "Now my brother is dead. His heirs are bastards born of incest. A lion's cub sits where a stag should stand. I could have taken the easy path, the one my brother took when Aerys grew mad. I could have raised my banners, broken faith, thrown in with another in the hope of being on the winning side. I did not. I came to you as the law's heir, not as the realm's lover. I expected no love. I expect obedience." A ripple of disquiet moved through the gathered men. Renly's jaw clenched, but he held his peace. Stannis lifted a hand. "Yet the law is not deaf," he went on, surprising them all. "It has eyes. It has seen the suffering of this realm under those who thought crowns were toys to be traded and discarded. The Lannisters have ruled by fear. My brother ruled by charm. I will rule by justice, but I am not so blind as to refuse counsel. You see at my right hand a man who set aside his own claim in recognition of law. You see at his side the woman whose family feeds your bellies and fills your purses. I will listen to them, and to others who prove themselves worth hearing." He let his gaze sweep the hall. It lingered for a heartbeat on Catelyn as it passed, and in that glance she saw something like acknowledgement. "If I am your king," Stannis said, "I will be your king in truth. I will not drink while you starve. I will not whore while your daughters are taken to pay debts. I will not smile and look away from injustice because the man who commits it is my friend. If that is not a crown you wish to bend to, leave now. No man will hold you. Go to Casterly Rock and swill Lannister wine until the lions tire of your company." No one moved. "A hard king," someone muttered near Catelyn. "Too hard by half." "Better a hard king than a mad one," another replied. When the last echoes of Stannis's words faded, Renly stepped forward. "You have heard your king," he said. His voice was smoother, his stance looser, but there was steel beneath the silk now. "You will hear your hand as well. I will speak plainly. The Lannisters will not yield their stolen throne easily. They will spill blood to keep their claws in it, yours if they can, not their own. We will ask much of you in the months to come. Your coin, your grain, your sons." A murmur, deeper now, uneasy. "I do not ask lightly," Renly went on. "I will ride at your head when we march. I will bleed beside you. And when this war is done, if the gods are good, Margaery Tyrell will sit as your queen and see that the harvests are gathered, the roads are repaired, and the songs sung of you in your halls are not just dirges for the dead. This I vow." Margaery stepped forward in her turn, hands folded before her. "I am no warrior," she said. "I will not pretend otherwise. My brothers will ride and fight. My father will counsel your king. My place will be here, where the wounds of war can be tended. I will see to your widows and your orphans. I will see to the rebuilding of what must be broken to win this fight. If I am to be your queen, I will be more than a face on a coin. I will be the hand that keeps your tables from going bare." Her words, soft as they were, landed with more weight than any sharpened speech. Catelyn watched the way the Lord's eyes changed as they listened. Hunger, fear, ambition all flickered and reshaped around this new axis. A hard king, a charming hand, a queen who promised not just glory but bread. It might yet work, she thought, if fortune did not decide to laugh in their faces. The castle grew quieter as the night wore on. The great hall emptied, its echoes dying down to a mutter, then to silence. The kitchens banked their fires. The lords retreated to their chambers to write letters, to count their hopes, to share their beds with those who might not live long enough to be mourned properly later. Catelyn found her feet carrying her along a familiar path, though she had never walked it before. The narrow gallery that overlooked the inner courtyard, its windows set deep in the stone. The wind had lessened. The rain fell in a softer, steady curtain now, blurring the torches into smears of gold. She had not expected to find the brothers there. They stood beneath a low arch near the stables, sheltering more from habit than necessity. Stannis had stripped out of his plate. He wore plain wool now, dark enough to merge with the night. Renly had kept his green cloak, though the silver stitching at its edge had gone dull with damp. A brazier burned between them, its coals a low, pulsing orange, throwing just enough light to carve their faces from the dark. All this talk of hope and mercy, Stannis was saying, his words drifting up through the chill air. You make promises as if your tongue were not already overburdened by the ones you have yet to keep. Renly shrugged. If I have promised too much, you may flog me when the war is won, he said lightly. I expect you will want to anyway, for one reason or another. I may, Stannis said, if the war is won. Renly's smile faltered. You think it cannot be? I think it will not be easy, Stannis replied. The lion has his teeth deep in the city. The Smallfolk fear him more than they hate him. Fear is a stronger chain than fondness. And yet you expect them to come willingly to your justice, Renly countered. You do not plan to rule with baskets of gold and casks of arbor red. I plan to rule, Stannis said simply. The rest will come as it may. A gust of wind sent a flurry of droplets through the archway. Renly drew his cloak tighter. For a moment, they stood in silence, listening to the distant boom of waves against the cliff. "We were not always like this, you know," Renly said. "At each other's throats." "We were never at each other's throats," Stannis replied. "Robert and I fought. You stood in the corner and laughed." "I was a child," Renly said, his voice sharpening. "You were already a man when I was still tripping over my own feet." "Children grow," Stannis said, "some more crooked than others." Renly laughed, though there was little mirth in it. "Always so kind with your words." Above them, hidden by shadow, Catelyn leaned against the cold stone of the window embrasure. She knew she had no right to listen. These were the private wounds of brothers. Yet how could she turn away when the future of her son's world might hang on whether these two men could find something other than old resentments to cling to? "You forget," Renly said after a time, "who was at Storm's End with you when Mace Tyrell ringed it in with his tents. You forget who sat in these halls, thin as a reed, watching you count out the last sacks of grain." "I forget nothing," Stannis said. "Least of all the faces of those who failed me." "Failed you?" Renly's head snapped up. "We were children. What could we have done? I was 8 when Robert rode off to his war." "8? You were the one he left behind with the keys to the castle." "And what did you do?" Stannis demanded. "You chased the maids and pestered the master-at-arms." "I tried to make men smile," Renly said. "Someone had to. The walls were closing in, Stannis. Men were eating rats boiled in stale ale. The only thing keeping them from carving pieces off each other was the hope that somewhere, out there, Robert was winning." Stannis stared at him, his face unreadable. "You think I did not know that? I think you knew only the weight of the walls, not the weight of their hearts," Renly replied. "You were always counting their rations, not their songs." "Their songs did not keep the Tyrells from the gate," Stannis said. "No," Renly agreed, "but they kept the men from opening it themselves." The brazier hissed as a stray drop of water struck a coal. The smell of wet iron rose. "You say I do not know the realm," Renly went on. "That I am a tourney knight drunk on my own reflection. Perhaps you are right, but I know this much. Men do not fight well for a ghost or for a scold. They fight for a face they can imagine cheering them when they return. If you want their loyalty, you must give them that face. You do not have it." "I do." Stannis's hand tightened on the edge of the brazier. "You speak as if you know your worth down to the last grain of gold," he said. "You have always been so certain that men would love you if only given the chance. And you have always been certain that no one could," Renly said quietly. The words hung between them, fragile as spun glass. "I kneel to you because the law says I should," Renly went on. "Not because I think you will be the easiest king to serve. You will be a misery to serve, Stannis. You will grind us all down to flour and bake us into your bread of justice. But if I must have a king, better you than some Lannister bastard. Better a man who believes in something, even if it chafes, than one who believes in nothing but his own appetites." Stannis's shoulders sagged, just a little. "You think me so blind to myself," he murmured. "Perhaps you are right. Perhaps I am a misery. But I will not stint my daughter's inheritance. I will not write promises that leave her cast aside." "Shireen is your heir," Renly agreed. "That is law. All I ask is that if the gods take her, and her children after, you will not let the realm fall into another storm of claimants. Name me after her. Let it be ink, not blood, that settles it." Stannis was silent a long time. Catelyn found herself thinking of Shireen, the girl with the half-smile and the skin like cracked stone, who had once clutched a doll at Dragonstone's window as the sea lashed the rocks below. She had never met the child, but the image had stuck in her mind. What sort of world would that girl inherit if the men in this courtyard failed? "Very well," Stannis said at last. "If she dies without issue, you shall be my heir. Not because I think you worthy, but because you are the last of our line and the realm is owed certainty. It will be written." Renly's shoulders loosened. "That is all I asked." "You asked for more than you know," Stannis said. "You asked me to trust you." You asked me to share myself with the realm through your smile. I will because I must. But if you ever think to use that smile against me, I will not, Renly said. I may mock you, Stannis. I may curse your stubborn hide, but I will not betray you. Not again. The braziers' glow painted their faces in the same orange, smoothing the lines of age and worry, making them for a moment look like boys again, whispering under blankets while their elder brother roared with laughter down the hall. From her window, unseen, Catelyn closed her eyes and offered a silent prayer to gods old and new. Let this hold. Let this be more than a night's truce. Let it be the root of something that can stand. The morning they rode out, the storm had spent itself. The air was sharp and clean, washed of the previous day's tension. Dawn crept over the eastern horizon in bands of bruised purple and gold, the clouds thin and high like scraps of torn silk. Storm's end woke early. The sound of boots on stone, of harness buckles clinking, of men calling to one another in a dozen accents, rose in a steady tide. Horses snorted clouds into the chill air as grooms tightened girths. Armorers fitted the last pieces of plate, their hammers ringing briefly before being swallowed by the open sky. From the gatehouse, Catelyn watched the host assemble. It stretched from the inner yard through the outer, a river of steel and color. Here the Stormlords with their heart and crowned stag banners. There the Reachmen with their sheaves of wheat and tall towers. The black and gold of Baratheon mingled with the green and gold of Tyrell until the eye could no longer easily tease them apart. It was a sight that might have stirred any heart not already wary of such gatherings. Catelyn thought of the trident again, of all the banners she had seen there years before, when Robert and Rhaegar had met in the river's boiling heart. So many colors, so many deaths. Her fingers tightened on the stone of the parapet. "Robb," she whispered, to no one and nothing but the morning air. "May we be worthy of the world we leave you." Below, Davos Seaworth moved through the ranks of men bound for the ships, checking ropes and masts and cargo with a smuggler's keen eye. The royal fleet, such as it was, waited in the bay. Fewer ships than Catelyn would have liked, but more than she had expected when she saw how lean Stannis's men were. They would sail north and east, up the coast toward King's Landing, while the main host took the King's Road inland. Stannis rode out first, on a dark bay horse whose breath steamed in the cold. His armor was plain but well kept, his antlered helm under his arm. The new crown rested in its place. He did not look comfortable beneath its weight, but he bore it as he had borne other burdens, without comment, without complaint. Renly came after, on a white courser that pranced as if it knew the eyes upon it. His green enamel gleamed in the morning light. He wore no crown, but the men cheered him as loudly as they did his brother when he passed. He acknowledged them with easy nods, the corners of his mouth lifting in that familiar half-smile. Margaery watched from the steps of the keep, flanked by her ladies. She had traded her dark gown for one of softer green, her hair braided back with small silver stag charms. When the brothers paused before her, she moved forward to lay a hand on each of their armored knees. "Return," she said simply. "Both of you. Do not make me a widow before I am once a wife." Renly covered her hand with his own. "We will return," he said, with the careless certainty of a man who had never yet failed to charm life into his favor. Stannis only nodded once, but there was something almost gentle in the way he looked at her. A flicker of recognition, perhaps, that this young woman and her roses had bound his cause as tightly as any oath. Catelyn descended from the gatehouse to meet them as they rode toward the open road. "Lady Stark," Stannis said, reining in, "you have seen what you came to see." "I have," she replied, "two brothers standing as one. It is more than I had hoped for, less than the realm deserves, perhaps, but more than it has had in some time." Renly laughed. "She pricks you even in her praise, Stannis. I like her." "You would," Stannis said. "You always did like those who told you no." "I married one," Catelyn said, unable to keep the ghost of a smile from her lips. "It did me little harm." The smile faded as quickly as it had come. "I will send ravens to Robb," she went on. He must hear of this from me, not from some wandering singer who will make a ballad of it before the ink dries. Tell him this, Stannis said. I claim all of the realm, north and south, as is my lawful right. But I have no desire to spill northern blood if I can help it. If he will bend the knee and name me king, I will confirm him as Lord of Winterfell and Warden of the North. I will see his sister Sansa freed from Lannister hands and return to him unharmed, so far as it is in my power. These are the terms. Catelyn inclined her head. I will tell him, whether he accepts. That is his choice. He is his father's son. Then I hope he has his mother's sense, Renly said. Else we will find ourselves back here in a few months, only with fur cloaks and wolf banners before the gate instead of roses. She looked up at him, at his careless charm and the steadier steel beneath. See that you give him a realm worth joining, she said. If you go to King's Landing and merely trade one cruel boy for a hard man with no kindness in him, the North will not come. It will stand apart, and the first snows of winter will fall on a broken crown. Winter comes whether crowns break or no, Stannis said. We have done what we can here. The rest will be decided on the Blackwater. And beyond it, Melisandre's voice drifted from where she sat astride a pale mare near the rear of the king's entourage. Her red hair burned in the dawn light, in places where even king's banners do not fly, in the cold lands, in the dark. Catelyn shivered, though the wind had died. I have no time for your shadow tales, priestess, she said. The living bleed enough without borrowing fear from your fires. You think me a borrower of fear, Melisandre said, her eyes heavy-lidded. Yet all I do is read what the flames already show. I see a boy in black, standing on a wall of ice, with the weight of the realm above and below him. I see his sword blaze with light as the darkness gathers. I see wolves at his side and dead things at his back. He has your husband's eyes. Catelyn's breath caught. You speak of my son. No, Melisandre said. Not that son. Another. A bastard, if I know the scent of such things. A Snow, perhaps. The North breeds them like thorns on a rose. Jon, Catelyn whispered, before she could stop herself. His name tasted of all the years she had spent resenting his presence in her halls, and all the days since she had spent wondering whether he yet lived beyond the wall. Stannis's head turned sharply. What is this? He demanded. Who is this bastard the Red Woman babbles of? Eddard Stark's get, Melisandre said. The boy he sent to the wall to wear black and die out of sight. Except the fires say he does not die. Not yet. Catelyn's hand went instinctively to the wolf's head clasp at her throat. She had never wished harm on the boy, she told herself. Only distance, only absence. Yet the thought of him in danger made something twist inside her, a knot she had never quite acknowledged. If there is any truth in your flames, she said, forcing steadiness into her voice, then pray for him. Pray he has the strength to stand where you say he must. I do not pray, Melisandre said. I serve, and I will see that my king stands where he must as well. The fires say his path and the boys will cross. Stannis scowled. I will not have my future ruled by some bastard steps, he said. No, Melisandre agreed, oddly mild. You will have your future ruled by your own choices, as you have chosen here. The flames show only the paths. Men walk them. Catelyn looked from the priestess to the two brothers, and for a fleeting instant she saw them as pieces on the same board. Stags, yes, but also shields, spears, stones set in a wall that might yet hold against something greater than Lannister gold. Go, she said, before your men grow restless with standing. You have a city to take. Stannis nodded once. Renly flashed her a grin that, for the first time, did not seem entirely carefree. Then they turned their horses and rode to the head of the host. The trumpets sounded. The gates of Storm's End groaned open. The river of men and steel flowed outward, down the road that would lead them to King's Landing and whatever waited there. Catelyn stood on the wall as the banners passed beneath her. The crowned stags, the golden roses, the hearts and towers and sheaves. When the last of them was gone and only dust remained, She felt something like a page turning in a book she had never wished to be written. Behind her, the castle settled into its own waiting. Ahead, the realm shifted on its axis. Far to the north, beyond rivers and fields and ruined villages, a boy in black stood upon a wall of ice, his breath misting in the cold, his hand resting on the hilt of a sword that had yet to earn a name worthy of legend. He did not know that, in a storm-lashed castle at the edge of the sea, two brothers had set aside crowns to march toward a different battle. He did not know that his own path would one day cross theirs, and that the choices made this dawn would ripple outward like circles in a frozen pool, touching even him. For now, there was only the wind, and the long road south that waited for the Baratheon's host, and the knowledge in Catelyn Stark's heart that she had helped shape a storm whose true fury had yet to be felt. The King's Road had seen many armies, but seldom one so strangely stitched together. From her place in the wagon, Catelyn Stark watched it unspool along the spine of the land, a river of steel and leather and color, flowing ever eastward. The crowned stag flew twice now above the host, black on gold for their king, black on gold on green for the younger brother who rode as his hand. Between and beside them, golden roses fluttered, bright as the sun itself. Stormlord's banners jostled among Tyrell sighing trees and bees and grails, and here and there the humbler devices of landed knights who were content to be swallowed into the larger current. The road itself was still half mud from recent rains. Wagon wheels sank and creaked. Horses snorted and stumbled where the stones had been uprooted by years of neglect and months of war. They were long days, these, and longer nights, but there was a restless energy to the host, as if the knowledge that it moved toward the heart of the realm lent each step a tighter purpose. Catelyn's wagon belonged, nominally, to the baggage train allotted to the King's Council. In truth, it was as much a rolling prison as any cage, though the bars were of courtesy and safety rather than iron. Stannis would not have her ride unguarded. Renly would not have her ride in visible chains. The compromise was this canvas-walled world, with two guards posted at the tailboard and another walking beside the horse. She had never been good at sitting idle. The wagon rocked beneath her as she worked the quill over the parchment, scratching out another line of careful script. Robb, she wrote, though the letter would be addressed King in the North by whatever cringing steward saw to the seals. The world has shifted again in the South. Stannis and Renly ride as one. Do not trust in it, but know that for now their swords point the same way. She paused, listening to the wheels creak and the muted rumble of the marching feet beyond the canvas. The ink glistened darkly on the fibers of the page. I have seen them together, she went on. They are not friends, but they are brothers, and something of that bond has survived the years and the wounds between them. Stannis is as hard as men say. Renly is as charming. Between them stands a queen who may yet prove more than a crown of roses. They ride for King's Landing. They swear that if they take the city, Sansa will be freed and sent to us. I write those words and feel as if I am stacking promises on reeds. A gust of wind tugged at the canvas, making it snap. Outside, a man cursed as his horse sidestepped into a rut. Catelyn lifted the parchment carefully and laid it on a board to dry, weighing its corners with small stones. 3 letters lay there already, edges curling. One to Riverrun for her brother Edmure, one to the Vale where Lisa sat in her sky eyrie, and one to Winterfell, though she did not know who there would read it now. Bran, or perhaps Maester Luwin, or perhaps some steward she had never met, a stranger occupying her home. Lady Stark, came a voice from outside the wagon. If it please you, the king sends word that we will halt at the next stream. He bids you walk a little. He says it will not do to arrive in King's Landing with you half-crippled from sitting. Catelyn smiled despite herself. His Grace is kind to think of my joints, she called back. Tell him I will wobble along well enough. The guard chuckled and moved away. She set the quill aside and flexed her fingers, feeling the stiffness in them ease slightly. The old gods of the north sat in their cold groves and said nothing to her now, but sometimes she imagined she could feel their regard nonetheless, like the weight of snow-laden branches. Outside, the King's Road rolled on beneath the host's feet. They reached the first village before noon. It had no name that anyone bothered to speak aloud. A smear of thatch and mud beside the road, with a wind-bent sept and a scatter of willow trees by a sluggish stream. The war had touched it already. Catelyn saw it in the charred ring where some past lord's men had camped, and in the wary way the Smallfolk peered from doorways as the host approached. Then they saw the banners, and the murmurs began. "Baratheon," someone breathed. "The Stag." "The Tyrell rose," another said, half awed, half anxious. "7 save us, that's Highgarden's flower. And 2 of the stags," an old man muttered. "Black and gold, both ways. How's a body to know which one is king?" Renly heard that, or something like it. Catelyn saw him slow his white courser, bring the horse to a gentle prancing halt beside a group of children who had gathered in the ditch. They wore rags, mostly, their feet bare and muddy, hair in tangles. One little girl had plaited daisies into her own braids, though they had wilted long ago. "Who's this, then?" Renly called down, his voice full of warmth. "All the lords of the realm gathered in the ditch without telling me?" The children giggled. One boy, bolder than the rest, stepped forward. "Are you the king?" he demanded. "Mida says kings take what they want and leave us to starve." Renly's smile wavered, just for a heartbeat. Then he leaned down and held out his gloved hand. "Your da should choose his words more carefully," he said lightly. "I am Renly Baratheon. Once I pretended to be a king. Today I ride for one. What's your name, lad?" "Tim," the boy said, not quite daring to touch the hand, though his gaze clung to it. Mida says Lord Tywin's men took the last ox we had. Said it was for the king in King's Landing." Renly's jaw flexed. "Well, Tim, the king I ride for won't take your ox without giving you coin for it," he said. "And if he hears someone has done so without his leave, he'll have the man's hide nailed to the gate." The boy blinked. "You swear it?" Renly looked over his shoulder. "Stannis," he called, "come look at this lord in the ditch who doubts your justice." Stannis had not intended to halt. That much was plain in the way his horse tossed its head when he jerked it around, and in the dark look he shot his brother. Yet he came, the host rippling and slowing around him like water around a stone. He looked down at the children, at the daisies in the girl's hair, at the way the villagers stood back with shoulders hunched as if expecting a blow. "This boy," Renly said, gesturing. "He says Tywin Lannister's men took his family's ox for the false king in King's Landing. He wants to know what sort of king you will be." "Does he?" Stannis said. His face might have been a mask carved from old oak. "What is your name?" "Tim," the boy repeated, defiant again now that the first shock was past. "Tim," Stannis said, "Tywin Lannister and his bastards have taken much from many. I mean to take everything from them. That will not bring your ox back. But when we have broken them, you will not see their red lion banners at your door again. That I swear." "On what?" the boy asked, surprising them all. "My ma says lords swear on things and then forget." "On my own head," Stannis said, "and on my daughter's. I do not speak words to see them blown away." He reached into his cloak then, and for a moment Catelyn thought he meant to pull out some token. Instead, he produced a small leather purse and tossed it down into the ditch. Tim caught it with fumbling hands. The coins inside clinked. "Buy another ox," Stannis said, "or seed for next year, or a better roof than that rat's nest." He jerked his chin toward the nearest hut. "If I hear you've drunk it away in the alehouse, I'll come back myself and see your hide tanned." The villagers laughed nervously. The boy grinned, sudden and bright. "Thank you, your grace," he said, with more feeling than formality. Then, after a moment, "Which one are you? The one in front or the one with the flowers?" Renly broke into a full-throated laugh, delighted. "The one with the flowers is only your hand now, lad. This is King Stannis. Remember his face. He won't smile for you, but he won't forget you either." "Onward," Stannis said brusquely, as if afraid he might be caught doing something likable. "We waste daylight." The host moved on, leaving the little village in a swirl of dust and whispers. Catelyn watched the people's faces as they turned to one another, as they opened the purse and gasped at the silver glint inside. They did not cheer, not as they might have for Robert once, but some of the fear leached from their eyes. Two faces, she thought, one to love, one to fear. If they can hold together, they might yet do what needs doing. Behind the marching wheels and hooves, the road smoked in the heat. Tyrion Lannister had always hated the heat. It made his scar itch and his patience shorter than usual, and there was precious little patience left these days as it was. From the top of the mud gate, the city smelled of too many bodies and not enough water. The Blackwater lay below him like a tarnished mirror, its sluggish surface broken by the occasional oars of a fishing skiff or the bloated carcass of something that had died upriver. The tide lapped against the sloping stone of the bank, bringing with it eddies of stink that even the river's width could not entirely mute. "You'll wear a hole in the stone if you keep pacing," Bronn observed, lounging against a crenel as if it were his own bed. "Might be an improvement, mind. Let some of the stink blow out." Tyrion halted his restless strides and scowled at the Sellsword. "If I had a gold dragon for every man who thought his wit improved by proximity to me," he said, "I would have emptied Casterly Rock, and my father could have spared us all this trouble." Bronn grinned, unbothered. "Your father's the one paying me to keep you alive. I suppose I should be grateful he didn't smother you at birth." "Many have had the same thought," Tyrion said dryly. His gaze flicked back to the road that disappeared into the haze beyond the city. "Any more word from the scouts?" "A rider came in from the Rosby Road," Bronn said. "Said the host flying stags and roses passed 2 days ago. Moving fast, for such a big beast." "2 heads," Tyrion murmured. "One hard, one soft. I suppose it was too much to hope they'd spend another week bickering at Storm's End." "You complaining?" Bronn asked. "You were the one muttering that the sooner they come, the sooner this is done." "That was before I had to trust half the defense of the city to whatever half-witted guardsman Joffrey hasn't managed to terrorize into running away," Tyrion said. "And before my dear sister decided that perhaps setting the entire river on fire wasn't a plan that required more than a token protest." He turned away from the view to look at the crates stacked along the wall. They were ordinary enough to look at. Plain wood, bound in iron, no different from any other shipment of wine or oil that passed through the city. Only the thin, sharp tang in the air gave them away. Wildfire in its dormant state, waiting to be woken. The alchemists of the Guild of Pyromancers had nearly wet themselves with excitement when Tyrion had called on them. They spoke of old glories, of caches of jars left over from the days when Aerys Targaryen had fancied turning the city into a funeral pyre. They spoke of green fire that burned wood and flesh and stone alike. They spoke of glory and of purity. Tyrion had listened, and then he had counted jars and asked questions about stability and range, and whether the city's own walls might be melted if a gust of wind changed at the wrong moment. "This stuff scares you," Bronn said now, as if reading his thoughts. "Anything that excites pyromancers as much as this does scares me," Tyrion said. "It's like giving a child a blade and telling him to wave it about so long as he doesn't cut himself. The odds are poor. Yet here it sits," Bronn said, nudging one crate with the toe of his boot. "And you put it there. To your own side. Stannis Baratheon is coming with ships and siege towers and gods know what else. His red woman whispers of fire. It seemed only polite to have some of our own ready. If we are to burn, let us choose the moment." He had seen reports, brought by Varys's little birds and by the more conventional ravens that still found their way to the Red Keep. Stannis had ships enough to pose a real threat on the water. His younger brother had Tyrell gold and grain and horses. Together, they were a storm such as King's Landing had not seen since Robert's day. And Tyrion Lannister was left with a mad king's fire, an inbred boy on the throne, and a city that muttered and shook under the weight of its fear. "Best pray the green stuff does its trick," Bronn said. "Else you'll be a very short hand of the king." "I am already short," Tyrion said. "The question is whether I'll be breathing." The gods have always enjoyed that particular jest. He squinted into the distance, as if he might see the glint of armor along the far horizon. We buy time, we build chains, we set our traps, and we hope that, for once, my father arrives when he says he will. And if he doesn't? Bronn asked. Then we find out whether Wildfire burns quicker than a dwarf, Tyrion said. My coin's on the fire. The sea route was slower on the map and quicker in the world. Davos Seaworth had learned long ago. Roads curved and broke and wallowed in mud. The coastline, for all its hidden rocks and treacherous shoals, at least kept its shape from day to day. The Black Betha surged through the choppy water, her black sails snapping as they caught a fresh gust. Spray flecked the air, cold and sharp. Davos licked a drop from his lips and tasted salt and something else. The faint tang of mud from the river they would soon be entering, the Blackwater rush that opened its mouth at King's Landing. Hold her true, he called to the helmsman. We're not in the river yet, but we don't want to wander too far from its teeth. I am Lord, the man grunted, his hands steady on the worn wood of the tiller. Davos had never grown entirely used to being called Lord. The word felt like a borrowed coat, heavy at the shoulders. He still thought of himself as a smuggler first when the sea smell was in his nostrils. And yet here he was, with a knight's belt and a lord's patch sewn over the stump of his fingers, serving a king who had once cut those same fingers off. The deck around him was cluttered with the proof of that service. Barrels of pitch, bundled rope, coiled lines ready to be flung. Men moved with purpose, checked knots, counted spears. A drummer beat a steady tattoo that matched the pulse of Davos's blood. He had argued for this fleet. When Stannis and Renly had agreed to march together, the question of how to split their strength had risen like a reef beneath the hull of their plans. Renly had wanted the spectacle of a united host sweeping toward King's Landing along the King's Road, a tide of banners no man could ignore. Stannis, remembering Dragonstone's long isolation, had insisted that the sea be used. The Lannisters have grown fat and lazy behind their walls, he had said in council. They rely on the river to bring them grain and wine. Cut that artery, and the city will bleed from within even as it faces our men at the gate. Renly had conceded. In the end, it had been Margaery who tipped the balance, pointing out that a hungry city was a restless one, and a restless city might turn on the very lions who claimed to protect it. So Stannis had given Davos the Black Betha and the other ships that could be spared, and sent him ahead with orders to scout the mouth of the Blackwater for traps. Lannisters, Davos muttered now under his breath, always a trap with you lot. He had run cargo into King's Landing before, in less honorable days. He knew the shape of its harbor, the smell of its quays. He knew how easily a ship could be penned and burned if a clever mind had the time and tools to prepare. The rumor of Wildfire had reached him even here, on the water. Sailors talked. They came from the city with tales of green fire and the alchemist's renewed importance. Davos had seen enough strange things in the world to put no faith in the comfort of ignorance. We'll scout the banks before we sail in with the rest, he said to his first mate, a brawny man from Driftmark with a scar across his cheek. Send 2 of the lighter craft ahead when we reach the river's mouth. I want eyes on every rock and shoal. I am Lord, the man said. You think the lions will have teeth in the water as well as on land? I think, Davos said, that if I were a Lannister with Wildfire in my cellars, I'd be thinking of ways to turn the river into a pyre. I don't mean to give them an easy bonfire. He gripped the rail more tightly as the Black Betha rose and fell over another swell. The wind tasted of coming storm, though the sky was only high cloud. He had sailed in worse with less at stake, yet he could not shake the feeling that the water itself held its breath, waiting. 7 keep us, he murmured, then corrected himself. Or whoever's listening, just keep some of us at least. Him most of all. By him, he meant Stannis. The man was a rock, unlovely and unforgiving, but Davos had built his life upon that rock now. If it cracked, he did not know what would become of the pieces. The Black Betha cut on toward the hazy promise of the city, and the smell of mud grew stronger. At night, the host transformed. The rigid lines of march dissolved into a haphazard city of canvas and rope. Fires bloomed like little orange flowers all across the field, each with its own ring of faces. Laughter drifted from one knot of men, a low argument from another, the tuneless rise and fall of a song from yet another, each note softened by distance. Catelyn sat by a modest fire near the edge of the royal encampment, her cloak wrapped tight around her shoulders. Her hair smelled of smoke. Her hands smelled of ink. The parchment on her lap caught the firelight in uneven waves as she read over her last letter to Robb, checking for places where she might have said too much or too little. She had always thought herself skilled at such balancing acts. As a girl, she had learned how to phrase a plea to her father so that he might think it his own idea. As a wife, she had learned how to ease Ned from one course to another without wounding his sense of honor. As a mother, she paused, quill hovering. As a mother, she had failed in ways she still flinched from touching, like half-healed scars. Sansa in King's Landing, Arya vanished, Bran broken, Rickon wild, Robb bearing a crown he had never asked for, and Jon, somewhere at the edge of the world in black, the one child she had never learned how to name without tasting bitterness. She dipped the quill again and forced herself back to the present. The king keeps his word for now, she wrote. He speaks of justice with conviction. His hand speaks of mercy and bread. The Tyrell girl speaks of widows and orphans. I do not know yet which of them the realm will truly follow. It may be that they will not choose until steel is at their throats and a new king sits where the boy Joffrey squats now. She paused, listening. Renly's laugh carried across the camp, bright even in the gathering dark. Catelyn glanced up to see him moving between the fires, Margaery at his side, the two of them like a pair of inlaid pieces on a game board, sliding easily between the rougher shapes of tents and wagons. Everywhere they went, men straightened, smiles came quicker. Renly spoke by name to some, clapped others on the shoulder, bent his head to listen to a joke from a hedge knight as readily as to a tale from a landed lord. Beyond them, under a canvas awning that sagged slightly in the middle, Stannis stood over a map table lit by a ring of lanterns. The wind tugged at the edge of the awning, threatening to tear it free, but the king did not seem to notice. His head was bent, his finger tracing lines along the painted road and river. Lords came and went, entering the lantern-lit circle to receive orders, leaving with their faces set. Catelyn wondered, not for the first time, whether any one man could ever hold both those roles in his hands, the heart-stirring figure in the firelight and the stern shadow over the map. Robert had never managed it. Perhaps no one could. A shadow fell across her parchment. She looked up to find Margaery Tyrell watching her, a faint question in her eyes. "May I join you, my lady?" the girl asked. "My feet are weary from following my lord husband through his rounds. He walks as if he expects the road to run out ahead of him." Catelyn gestured to the space by the fire. "Sit. It will do you good to be still for a moment." Margaery folded herself down with practiced grace, arranging her skirts so that they did not drag in the dirt. For a time they sat in silence, listening to the camp's murmurs. "You have children," Margaery said at last, as if it were a statement rather than a question. "Yes," Catelyn said, feeling the familiar tug at her ribs. "I have many scattered now. The war is a great scatterer of things. My mother says I must think of the realm as my child," Margaery said, "that a queen must love it with the same fierce devotion, that I must be willing to bleed for it in my way." "In your way," Catelyn echoed. "And what way is that?" "Not with a sword," Margaery said, almost regretful. "Loras stole all the swords for our generation. No, my bleeding will be in chambers and birthing beds and in the slow, dull ache of listening to men argue themselves into foolishness and then coaxing them back from the brink." Her smile was small but real. "I have been practicing that last since I was a girl. My father and brothers require much coaxing." "You think these men will be different?" Catelyn asked, nodding toward the distant figures of Stannis and Renly. "I think they are not boys," Margaery said, "and that is a start." Boys break toys to see what happens. Men only break what they think they can fix. My task will be to remind them that some things, once broken, cannot be mended." Catelyn studied the girl's face. There was youthful softness to it still, but the eyes were older than the rest. "You speak as if you have known loss," she said. Margaery's gaze flicked briefly toward the north, where the faint smear of the wall lay somewhere beyond the world's edge. "Loss comes in many forms," she said. "A childhood given to lessons instead of play, a name forged into a chain, a future that narrows to a single road you did not choose. I have lost freedom, my lady. I mean to gain something for that loss." "What?" Catelyn asked. "A realm where my children," she did not quite flinch as she said it, "do not have to wonder if they will be murdered at a wedding feast because their father chose the wrong lord to trust. A realm where a highborn girl is more than a bargaining chip between houses. A realm where men like your Ned can speak truth without losing their heads." Catelyn's throat tightened. "That realm would be a rare gift." "Then we must make it," Margaery said, "with what tools we have." She stirred the fire with a stick, sending up a swarm of sparks. For a moment, Catelyn thought of the north again, of snow instead of sparks, of cold instead of heat. Somewhere out there, beyond even the furthest flicker of their campfires, Jon Snow stood watch upon the wall, his world bounded by ice and wind. She wondered if he felt any echo of this, if the shifting of kings and banners in the south carried any weight in that high, frozen place. She bent back to her letter and added a line, almost on impulse. "Trust no one easily," she wrote. "But if these Baratheon brothers hold to their pact, there may come a day when the North must choose whether to stand apart or to stand with them. I do not know which choice is wiser. I only know that winter cares little for our crowns." The wind on the wall cut sharper than any knife. Jon Snow stood with his cloak wrapped tight around him, the black fur stiff with frost, and looked out over the dark sea of forest that stretched southward. Somewhere beyond that line of trees, beyond the curve of the horizon and the tangle of roads and rivers, the game of kings was being played with fire and gold. Here, there was only the creak of ice and the occasional low whine from Ghost as the direwolf pressed against his leg. "You smell it too," Jon murmured, resting his hand on the thick white fur between Ghost's ears. "Or maybe you just smell supper." Ghost huffed, a little plume of steam in the cold air, and bumped his head against Jon's hip. His red eyes flicked between the forest and his human, restless. Below, in the courtyard of Castle Black, torches burned in iron brackets. Men moved between them with hunched shoulders, their black cloaks indistinguishable from the night until they stepped into the light. The smell of wood smoke and boiled beef rose faintly even to the top of the wall, but it could not entirely mask the deeper scent of old ice and older stone. Jon's fingers flexed on the hilt of Long Claw. The Valyrian steel blade hung at his side, its weight a constant reminder of the man who had given it to him, and of the expectations that gift carried. Lord Commander Mormont had seen something in him, something Jon was still not sure he wanted to believe in. He had no letters from the south. Ravens flew to Castle Black, but they seldom carried messages meant for a bastard in black. News came in fits and starts, in half-heard snatches of conversation between stewards and maesters. He knew of Ned Stark's death. The knowledge still sat like a stone in his gut. He knew that Robb had been named king by the Northern Lords. That had filled him with a brief, searing pride that quickly curdled into a familiar ache of exclusion. King in the North, Jon thought. My brother, my blood. And I wear black on a wall of ice, and I will never stand beside him at a council fire. He had heard, too, of Stannis Baratheon and his banners, of Renly's crown and of the Tyrell roses blooming where they might. He did not know, could not know, that those same banners now marched as one. That a woman who had once scowled at his presence in her hall now wrote of him in a letter by firelight. That a red priestess had seen his face in flames. He only knew that the forest looked different these days. There were fewer birds, for one thing. Their absence left the sky strangely hollow. The trees themselves seemed to brood, their branches clawing at the heavy clouds. The air smelled wrong, too. still and stale, as if the world were holding its breath. "Jon," came a voice from behind him, Samwell Tarly's, hesitant as ever. "You'll freeze solid if you stand up here much longer. The Lord Commander wants you. There's been a raven from Eastwatch." Jon turned, his cloak swirling. "Another sighting?" Sam swallowed. "Another report. Wildlings, moving south more than before. And, something else. They say the dead don't stay that way sometimes, when they fall outside the wall." The words landed like stones dropped into a frozen pond, cracking the surface. Jon looked once more southward, toward a world locked in its own battles over thrones and crowns and titles. "Tell the Lord Commander I'm coming," he said. "We'll need every man we have, if these tales are true." Ghost growled softly, the sound low and sure. "You feel it too," Jon said. "Storms in the south, worse things in the north." He rested his hand on the direwolf's back as they walked toward the stairs. "We'll hold here, whatever comes. It's what we swore." The wind took his words and flung them out into the night, where they were lost among the stars. On the King's Road, tempers were as quick to spark as tinder in dry grass. It began, as such things often did, over something small. A cask of wine that a Reach Knight claimed for his company, arguing that his lord had paid for the vintage. A Dragonstone sergeant who insisted that the cask had been allotted to the king's men in the count made that morning. A shove. A word spoken with the wrong curl of the lip. By the time Catelyn hurried toward the commotion, summoned by the sudden rise of voices, it had swelled into a ring of men squared off in the flickering firelight. Stormlanders and Dragonstone men on one side, their armor plain and battered, their faces hard. Tyrell men on the other, cloaks green and gold, their mail better maintained, their hands resting a little too casually on their sword hilts, as if eager for an excuse. The cask itself lay on its side between them, its bunghole leaking a slow trickle of dark red into the dust. "You lot think you can drink up all the best and leave us the dregs," the Dragonstone sergeant was saying, his voice thick with anger. "We starved on that rock for your king's brother. We'll not starve now just so you can piss Arbor gold into the ditches. Our coin paid for this wine," the Reach Knight snapped back. Loras Tyrell stood at his shoulder, his jaw clenched, his eyes bright with the kind of anger that came as much from wounded pride as from real insult. "Mind your tongue, crag rat, when you speak to your betters." "Betters?" the sergeant snarled. "I see no betters here. I see peacocks who've never gone hungry a day in their lives. If you'd been at Storm's End when Mace Tyrell cut us off, you'd know what it is to look at your lord's plate and wonder if you'll lick it clean after." Men murmured, shifting closer. Fingers tightened on hilts. Someone spat. Someone else laughed, a brittle, dangerous sound. "Enough," Catelyn called. No one heard her over the rising clamor. Then Renly was there, pushing through the ring with an agility that made his armor seem lighter than it had any right to be. He planted himself between the two groups, one hand on the cask, the other held up. "Seven hells, you're like dogs snarling over a bone," he said. "I thought I was leading men, not curs." "Your Grace," Loras said tightly. They insulted your pride, Ser Loras," Renly said. "Not your honor. The two are not the same, though many men confuse them." He turned to the Dragonstone sergeant. "And you, my good sir, did your king no favors by calling my brother's allies peacocks. We need every sword we can get, whether it's held by a man with green silk on his shoulders or old rope." "We're not equal," the sergeant muttered. "Not in this camp." "In this camp," came another voice colder, "all men are equal in one regard." Stannis had arrived, his presence cutting through the gathered men like the edge of an axe. He wore no crown now, but he did not need one. The way the light fell on his face, the way his eyes swept the circle, was crown enough. "All men here," he said, "are equally subject to my justice." Silence fell, sharp and heavy. "You," he pointed to the sergeant. "You led this?" The man swallowed and nodded. "And you," he said, turning to the Reach Knight at Loras's shoulder. "Did you answer insult with your hand on your hilt?" The knight flushed. "Your Grace," he spoke. "I did not ask what he spoke," Stannis said. "I asked what you did. Men always have something to say. Swords are what concern me." The knight shifted, then bowed his head. "Yes, Your Grace. I took offense. I should not have." "No," Stannis agreed. "You should not. You should have come to your lord. Instead you stand here ready to spill your own blood and your brother's over a cask of wine that will taste like vinegar on your tongues once you've poured it down your throats." He turned to the sergeant. "And you think the men of Dragonstone more deserving because you have suffered more. Perhaps you have. It earns you my respect. It does not earn you the right to call allies cowards to their faces." Catelyn saw the shame flicker in the sergeant's eyes, quickly masked by stubbornness. "You will both be flogged," Stannis said. A murmur ran through the crowd. 10 stripes each, not for being offended, but for putting your pride before the army's strength. Let every man here see that. Renly stiffened. "Brother," he began, "there's no need. If you would keep your hand's place," Stannis said without looking at him, "then keep your hand from staying mine in matters of discipline." Renly's jaw worked. He hesitated, then inclined his head, slow and hard. Loras shot him a look, half plea, half anger, but Renly did not meet it. "You think this harsh," Stannis said to the gathered men. "Good. Remember it when your tempers flare again. The Lannisters are ahead of us. The North is watching us. I will not have our strength bled out in petty squabbles along the King's Road." His gaze swept them, pinning each man for a heartbeat. "Any man who draws steel against an ally without my leave will have that hand taken. Any man who kills an ally in a brawl will hang. If you must fight, fight lions." He gestured to a nearby captain. "See it done. 10 stripes. Publicly." The crowd broke, men dispersing in uneasy ripples. The wine cask lay abandoned, its contents slowly soaking into the thirsty ground. Renly stood where he was, watching as the sergeant and the knight were led away. Catelyn moved to his side. "You would have spared them," she said quietly. "I would have made them share the damned cask and shake hands over it," Renly said. "Now they'll carry scars. So will their men's trust." "Scars heal," Catelyn said, "sometimes stronger than the flesh was before. A lesson remembered under the lash is seldom forgotten." Renly's mouth twisted. "You and Stannis make a pair." He glanced at her. "I hope you're right, for all our sakes." In the distance, Melisandre watched the small drama with unreadable eyes, the firelight painting her hair the color of fresh blood. The Red Keep was a maze of shadows and whispers, and few knew its twists better than the man called the Spider. Varys moved silently along the narrow gallery that overlooked the throne room, his soft shoes making no sound on the worn stone. Peter Baelish walked beside him, hands clasped behind his back, expression one of mild interest, as if he were merely admiring the view. Below them, the Iron Throne squatted in its usual sullen glory, a twisted mass of blades turned to a chair by dragon fire and vanity. Joffrey perched upon it like a child atop a pile of swords, his narrow shoulders swallowed by the weight of his crown. He slouched, kicked his heels against the riser, and stifled a yawn as a petitioner droned on about grain shortages in the city. "His Grace seems enchanted by the cares of rule," Littlefinger murmured. "Ruling is a hard business," Varys replied mildly, "particularly for one so young." One so young and so ill-suited, he did not add. Cersei sat at Joffrey's right hand, her golden hair coiled and pinned, her green eyes sharp. She leaned in occasionally to murmur in the boy's ear. He scowled more often than he nodded. "The people grumble," Varys said. "They do not like hunger. They do not like the sight of soldiers in their streets. And they do not like hearing that 2 Baratheon hosts march as one while their own king preens in his hall." "Oh, leave the poor boy his preening," Littlefinger said. "It's all he has, that and his mother's love, or something like it." He leaned on the gallery rail, peering down at Joffrey with speculative eyes. 2 stags, you say. 1 crowned, 1 uncrowned. How quickly the wind changes. Last week, every raven brought news of swords raised for Renly. This week, they all croak of brothers reunited. And next week, Varys asked. Next week, perhaps we'll have 3 stags, Littlefinger said lightly. If Robert's bastards find their courage. Or some northern wolf will declare himself king of snow and ice, if he hasn't already. Varys' smile did not reach his eyes. The North has a king, I hear, he said. Robb Stark, young, but not unblooded. He has given the Lannisters more trouble than they expected. Troublesome wolves, Littlefinger said, but far away. Our nearer concern is the 2-headed stag. Stannis has always had a talent for holding what's his. Renly has a talent for convincing others that what is his should be theirs as well. Together, they may make a dangerous beast. The city walls are strong, Varys said. The Hound is fearsome. Ser Mandon and the other White Cloaks are not without skill. And we have Wildfire. And a chain, Littlefinger said. Do not forget the chain. Our clever little hand strains his mind to think of ways to choke the river. He might yet manage it. Do you doubt him? Varys asked. I never doubt a man's ability to cause disaster, Littlefinger said. Only his ability to avoid it. He straightened, dusting an imaginary speck from his sleeve. In any case, I imagine we shall soon see which stag has the sharper antlers. Perhaps they'll gore each other and make the field tidy for our good king. Varys did not bother to answer. Littlefinger talked of tidiness as if he had not spent years sowing the seeds of chaos wherever he walked. Tell me, my lord, Varys said instead. If the Baratheon brothers take the city, where will your loyalties fall? Littlefinger's smile widened, veins of cruelty running through it. With the winner, of course, as any good subjects should. But if I had to choose, he tapped his cheek with one finger. Renly makes charming company. Stannis does not. Charming companions are pleasant at table, Varys said, but perhaps less so on a throne where hard decisions must be made. Perhaps, Littlefinger mused, and perhaps the realm is tired of hardness after Tywin's gold and Robert's hammering. The Smallfolk are simple. Give them a smiling face, a full belly, and someone else to blame for their misfortunes, and they will sing your praises while you pick their pockets. Varys said nothing. He thought of other realms, other kings, other wars. He thought of a boy on a wall of ice, though he could not say why that image came to him. Be careful, Peter, he said softly. Sometimes the pockets you pick are sewn from leather you did not spin, and the hand that reaches into them finds a blade instead of coin. Littlefinger chuckled. Oh, Varys, you worry too much. The game is more fun when the pieces are sharp. Below, Joffrey dismissed the petitioner with a wave of his hand and called for entertainment, bored already with the cares of his kingdom. They saw the city first as a smear against the horizon, a darker band beneath the pale sliver of dawn. As the sun climbed, the smear took shape. The jagged line of walls, the huddled mass of roofs, the pale snake of the road leading up from the river gate. The red keep loomed above it all, a red stone crown on a brow of rock. The Blackwater gleamed to the south, wide and sluggish, its surface broken by the stumps of old piers and the thin masts of fishing boats. Closer to the city, Davos' scouting had shown. Something else marred the water's smoothness, a line of darker shapes beneath the surface, like the backs of submerged beasts. A chain, he had said in council, pointing to the crude map he'd scratched on parchment. They've put a boom across the river, iron links thick as a man's thigh. It lies on the bottom now, but they can raise it when our ships are past, trap them in the mouth like fish in a weir. Stannis had listened, his face unreadable. We'll not be caught so easily, he'd said. We'll test the chain. If it holds, we'll adjust. But we will not shy from the river because of it. Now, on the low ridge that gave them their first true view of King's Landing, Stannis and Renly sat their horses in the chill morning air, studying the city. It looks smaller from here, Renly said. When I was a boy, it seemed the whole world. It is a den of rats, Stannis said. They've built their hovels up the slopes and called it a city. The only thing that gives it importance is that chair made of swords. And the people? Catelyn put in from where she sat a little back, her horse's breath pluming. Hundreds of thousands crowded behind those walls. Hungry now, likely. Frightened. Whatever happens here will fall on them like a hammer. Renly nodded. And hammers break more than crowns, he said. I remember the riots when Robert let things slide. We were young then, but not blind. I saw a man pulled limb from limb by a mob because he wore a Lannister badge. We are not here to coddle mobs, Stannis said. We are here to take the city. And then to rule it, Renly said. The two are not the same task. Stannis grunted. Our first concern is those walls. Davos. The smuggler rode up, his cloak flapping. His face drawn from too little sleep and too much staring at treacherous water. The river's mouth is as I said, he reported. They've sunk fire ships in the shallows, too. Old hulks packed with pitch and gods know what else. The current's slow near the city, but it's enough to carry flame if they catch us unawares. Wildfire, Catelyn said. We've all heard the stories. The Mad King wanted to drown his enemies in it. I suppose the Lannisters see no reason to let a madman's toys go to waste. Wildfire burns friend as easily as foe, Davos said. I'd wager my last finger they have no full measure of what they play with. We will give them cause to learn, Stannis said. Your ships will go in first, Davos. Probe the chain. If you can sweep aside their fire ships or set them off before they're close enough to burn us, do it. And if the chain rises? Davos asked. Then we find another way, Stannis said. The river's not our only path. He turned his gaze back to the walls. The Lion Gate, the Mud Gate, the King's Gate. They cannot be strong everywhere at once. We will press them. Renly's hand rose to shade his eyes. Those walls will be lined with archers, he said, and half the city's behind them. We must give them a reason to open the gates rather than stand and watch us bleed. You would threaten the Smallfolk, Stannis said, a warning in his tone. I would promise them something better than what they have, Renly said. A king who is not a boy with a crossbow. A queen who will not starve them while she drinks arbor gold. We must send a rider under truce. Stannis's lips thinned. Truces waste time. They buy us other things, Renly said. I will go. Let them see my face. Half the city remembers me from Robert's days. They liked me then. They may like me still. Catelyn watched the play of expressions across Stannis's face. Resistance, consideration, reluctant acceptance. Very well, he said. You will go under my banner. You will offer them this. Open the gates, surrender Joffrey, Cersei, and their nearest kin, and they will be spared sack and fire. Refuse, and we will take the city with blood. And the North? Catelyn asked. Will your terms say anything of Robb? Stannis glanced at her. If they surrender, I will release Sansa Stark into your custody, he said, and any other Northerners held against their will. That much I can promise. The rest depends on your son. It was more than she had expected. Less than she wanted. It would have to suffice for now. Then let us send the rider, Renly said, before the sun climbs too high. The city will have the day to argue itself into knots while we make ready for whichever answer they choose. He turned his horse, cloak swirling, and for a moment Catelyn saw the outline of him against the city, green and gold framed against red and stone. A two-headed stag, indeed. If the Lannisters were wise, they would be afraid. The trouble with Lannisters, she thought, is that they are wise and foolish at once. The command tent felt smaller than any peasant's hut that night. The map table dominated its center, the painted rivers and hills crowded with little carved markers. Ships along the Blackwater, towers and ladders along the walls, tiny lions atop the gates where the Lannister strength was thought to be thickest. The candle flames wavered with each breath. The air was thick with wax and sweat and the faint, acrid tang of fear unspoken. Stannis stood at the head of the table, as always, his hands braced on the wood, his gaze fixed on the little lion at the mud gate. Renly stood opposite, arms folded, studying the same small wooden beast as if he meant to charm it into surrender. Davos and Loras took the flanks. Catelyn and Margaery stood a little back, near enough to listen, far enough not to be in the first line of fire should tempers flare. "We hit them at dawn," Stannis said. "Davos, your ships will advance with the tide. The lighter craft will go first, testing the waters. If they set their fire ships alight too early, all the better. We will have room to adjust." "They'll likely wait," Davos said. "Let us come in thick, then light the river up at once. It's what I'd do if I were them." "You are not them," Stannis said, "and that is a blessing." He moved a cluster of ships forward on the map. "Our main strength will be here, pressing the mud gate. If they chain the river, we will use it as an anchor, not a trap. Ladders, rams, towers." His finger traced lines. "Renly, you will take the vanguard at the King's Gate with your knights. If they fall back to shore up the river, you press. If they hold firm, you pin them in place while we hammer at the mud gate." "If they sally out?" Loras asked, his eyes bright at the thought. "Then you cut them to pieces," Stannis said. "But they will not. Lannisters are not fools. They prefer walls between themselves and sharp steel." Renly's mouth quirked. "You speak as if you are not half Lannister yourself, through your father's marriage." Stannis's face darkened. "I have Baratheon blood. The Lannisters have always thought they're superior. That belief will die with them." "Let us not waste breath cursing bloodlines," Catelyn said. "What of the Smallfolk? You promised them mercy if they open the gates. If they do not, and you must take the city by storm, how will you keep your men's hands from plunder?" Stannis's jaw tightened. "I will give the order," he said. "Any man who rapes or steals will hang. We will not take the city to turn it into a pit." "Orders are one thing," Catelyn said. "Frenzy is another. Men in the grip of victory do not always hear their king." "Then I will make them hear," Stannis said. "Through example if need be." Renly glanced at her. "We will set Tyrell men at the gates," he said. "They are well trained. They like their comforts too much to see the city gutted beyond use. And my brother is not the only one who can hang men." Margaery's lips pressed together. "Hang whom you must," she said softly. "But remember that every man you hang is a son, a husband, a father. Each rope sends ripples we may not see for years." "We do not have years," Stannis said. "We have tomorrow." "And beyond tomorrow," Melisandre murmured from the tent's edge. "You have nights you cannot yet imagine." The candles flickered as if a draft had moved through. Catelyn suppressed a shiver. She did not want to hear the Red Woman's prophecies now, not when steel and fire already crowded the air. "Speak, then," Stannis said, irritation and a flicker of curiosity warring in his tone. "You've watched the flames long enough. What do they show for tomorrow?" Melisandre stepped forward just enough that the light caught the planes of her face. Her ruby burned at her throat, pulsing in time with some unseen rhythm. "I see green fire," she said, her voice low. "A river burning under a sky filled with screams. Ships turned to skeletons of blackened wood. Men leaping from decks and walls into water that does not quench the flame. I see a chain drawn tight as a noose." Davos's throat worked. "And beyond that?" Stannis demanded. "Do you see victory?" "I see a stag, half shrouded in smoke," Melisandre said. "And another, its antlers tangled with rose vines. I see a lion bleeding on stone. I see a wolf at a crossroads, turning his head this way and that, not yet choosing his path. And high above them all, I see a boy in black, his sword a line of light in the dark." Catelyn's heart stuttered. "Again with your boy," she said. "The bastard at the wall." "The wall is where the true war will be fought," Melisandre said. "This is only the clearing of ground. You think we risk this so lightly?" Renly's tone sharpened. "Men will die tomorrow. Good men." "Men always die," Melisandre said. "The question is whether their deaths buy anything worth the price." "Enough," Stannis snapped. "I will not have my men's courage sapped by talk of doom. They ride for a city tomorrow, not for some phantom in the snows. He looked around the table. "Go," he said. "Sleep if you can. Pray if you must. At dawn we march." One by one, they filed out, leaving the map and the candles to their solitary vigil. Catelyn lingered for a moment, her hand resting on the carved wolf marker she had placed near the neck, a small reminder of the north on a southern board. "Robb," she whispered, "hold your line. I will try to hold mine." Then she left the tent and stepped into the cold, damp night, where the murmur of the sleeping host rose and fell like a troubled sea. Far away, where dawn would come later and colder, Jon Snow stood before the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch and listened to words that would shape his next steps. "The wildlings are moving," Jeor Mormont said, stabbing a thick finger at the map. "Not in little bands, not in raiding parties. In a mass. Every scout we send north comes back with the same story, if he comes back at all. Mance Rayder is calling his people together. We may see more at the wall in the next half year than we've seen in a generation." Sam, hovering near the fire, swallowed audibly. "Why?" he asked. "Why would they all come south at once?" "Because something worse than us is moving behind them," Mormont said. "When a flock of crows takes wing all at once, you look to see what stirred them from the trees." Eamon's pale eyes turned toward Jon. "You have seen something of that, have you not?" the old maester asked. "On your ranging with Corran." Jon's hand tightened on the back of the chair in front of him. Memories rose, cold deeper than any he had known. Dead men in the snow, blue eyes that held no life and yet moved, struck. The feel of Corran Halfhand's life leaving his body under Jon's sword. The weight of that required betrayal still heavy on his conscience. "I have," he said quietly. "They are real. Whatever we thought they were in the tales, they are worse." Mormont grunted. "Aye. And the rest of the realm plays at crowns while we watch the dead walk." He shot a glance at the raven perched in its little cage. The bird tilted its head and croaked, "Corn, corn," as if mocking them all. "Ravens from the south bring tidings," Aemon said. "Stannis Baratheon marches on King's Landing. The Lannisters prepare their defenses. The north has a king of its own. The riverlands burn. All the while, we sit atop our wall and count our dwindling numbers." Jon looked from one old man to the other. "What can we do?" he asked. "We're few, and the wall is long. We do what we have always done," Mormont said. "We hold. We send word where we can. We hope that some ears hear us." He fixed Jon with a hard stare. "And you, boy, you've a part in this. The men you rode with, the bits of their tongue you picked up, the looks they gave you. You know more of what goes on beyond the wall than most of us now. I'll want you at the front when we move to meet them." "Yes, Lord Commander," Jon said. The words sat heavy on his tongue. "I'll do whatever is needed." "That's what your father would have said," Mormont grunted. Eddard Stark was a stubborn man, but he understood duty. Jon felt the familiar flicker of hurt at the name. "I'm not his true son," he said. "Not like Robb." Aemon made a soft sound. "I was not the heir my father wanted either," he said. "I wore black while my brother wore a crown. Blood is a crooked river, Jon Snow. It runs where it will, regardless of the stones men pile to turn it." The raven flapped its wings, scattering a few black feathers. "Snow," it croaked. "Snow, snow." Jon ran a hand through his dark hair. Somewhere in the south, he knew his brother rode to war. Somewhere beyond even that, other men fought over a chair of swords. He might never see any of it. His war would be here, on this wall of ice between the living and the dead. "Go and rest," Mormont said. "Tomorrow we plan our own march. The Baratheons may take their city or fail at its gates. It makes little difference to us. We face a different storm." Jon nodded and turned to go. As he did, he felt Ghost press against his leg, a silent, steady presence. Whatever storm comes, he thought, we'll meet it, here at the end of the world. He stepped out into the cold night, and far to the south, another host settled into uneasy sleep, its dreams lit by the promise of green fire and the shadow of a city that had been a prize and a graveyard for kings. Tomorrow, the two-headed stag would lower its antlers and charge.